Welcome to Explore, Explain. This is a long-form video and podcast series sharing conversations with data visualization designers and developers from around the world. Each episode explores the detailed hidden thinking behind a single project or a series of related works to explain the what, the why, and the how of the design process. So let's jump in to today's episode with your host, Andy Kirk.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Explore Explain. My name is Andy Kirk, and the episode you're about to watch or listen to is the second part of the special The State of Data Viz live webinar. So episode 7 was the first part. This is the second part, where we cover some remaining topics that we didn't quite fit in to a single episode. So we're going to jump straight into the conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you again for tuning in. I think we'll crack on now. Obinna, we've had lots of comments flying in and things mentioned in the group. I don't think we can acknowledge and respond to everything mentioned, but hopefully those people in the audience can see the comments being made and the works being shared, and we will take the transcript and sort of summarize the key things there. And there will be one more quick survey at the end of the session to get people's sense of where they feel Data Viz is. But just moving on to the part B. So this is looking at the research, the resources, and I'm not sure to what extent we can all answer this, but that in itself may be a finding. You know, what role does academia play in Data Viz? It clearly plays a role. There are lots and lots and lots of academics working and studying Data Viz in universities, lots of programs teaching this. I often feel a little bit disconnected from the research side. And I think part of that is sometimes it's just overwhelming the amount, because it always seems to be funneled through, let's say, around the time of the Viz conference. And you get nothing, and then you get like a million papers all at once. And it feels like, oh, I wasn't prepared for all that. I'll do it next year. I'll look at them next year. I mean, to what extent do you feel connected to the academic developments, the research, the developing of new techniques and ideas in David? I'll come to you, Lisa, just to kick off with this one.
Sure. Well, I'm so grateful for that community because it's the basis of lots of articles I write, and I don't need to look at, or I'm not looking at all the papers that come out in 1 year. I'm specifically looking for new papers when I'm writing about a topic, and it's great. Like I'm trying to include them as much as possible in what I write about. I am with you on that. It would be nice if it could be translated more for the database practitioners. Like I know we had initiatives like multiple views a couple of years ago.
Yes, yeah, great point. Yeah.
That tried to do exactly that, to put in normal words what was found out in a paper. I think the last post, I actually checked it this morning, was from October last year. So it feels like it's not active anymore, but that was
Because it's hard, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I really like Enrico Bertini's blog that is on Substack. Like he's continuing that work, I feel like. And he's done so with his podcast, but now with his blogs. It's really nice to read these blogs posts to feel a little bit more informed.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I really enjoy also the work of the University of Washington Interactive Data Lab because they are so close on the practitioner side with the software they put out. I feel like every second paper they release, it comes with a software. They just released this color tool called Color Buddy,
Yeah.
which is amazing. And back then they put out data visualization tools like Lyra, which I really liked and found fascinating. So it's great to see that they continue with this work. But yeah, I'm also not visiting the Viz conferences. I'm also not that informed as I should be, maybe.
And I think that's an important point, which is, you know, I've perhaps positioned that in the wrong way, which is maybe it sounds like I'm blaming them for not coming to me on a plate. Here are the things that you need to know, Mr. Kirk. No, it is down to me, but I think it's, in some respect, it is the overwhelmingness. It's also, as you said, Lisa, you kind of find reason to go for this stuff when you've got a very specific thing to find out, and therefore you possibly lose, or I find that I lose those things that I don't know I need to know that is being pushed out there. I mean, Juuso, what's your kind of feel of your connection to the world of
Hmm.
academia in this sense?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, we are immensely in debt to academia for everything, like more or less everything, every method that we use flows from academia, directly or indirectly. And also academia is the place where people get exposed to data viz. So even if they don't, study as researchers, data visualization, they get exposed to it, to the methods, and it sort of then from there goes to the wider society when many of those exit academia when they graduate and become or start working in other fields. But I do agree that if we look at academic visualization research, there is a bit of disconnect with the modern practice. And I think one reason is the time horizon, which in academia tends to be quite long. So when you get a paper, you start writing a paper to when it gets accepted to when it gets published, it can be 2 years or something like that. And in the industry, things move quite a bit faster than that. So to answer the questions that we as industry professionals find most pressing via academic research can be a bit of a slog. So to get the answers within the academic publishing process is simply quite a slow way. And for that reason, as I think Robert E. Horn said, that information design is the art and science of preparing information so that it can be used by human beings. So there is the art and the science sometimes is lagging a bit behind due to the slowness of the academic process.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a really great summary, actually. And something that really chimes with my sense that inevitably, a lot of the work that is done in research is perhaps leans more towards the testing things. Does this work or not? Which is the best? Which is the optimum? Perhaps less so some of the sort of softer edges of the human side of data viz. But I'll come to Joe. You on this one. What's your kind of feeling? And again, you've got a foot in the sort of teaching side of academia, and we'll come on to that very shortly. But something from the kind of the knowledge transfer side, how are you feeling that? I mean, actually, maybe a specific question. What do you do at Applied Works to kind of plug into latest things that you need to be aware of?
I think teaching is one way of doing that. I'm
Right.
increasingly more involved in teaching. So I teach a day a week. I'm down to 3 days a week actually Applied Work. So I'm less actually on projects now.
Right.
And like the thing I find most exciting is the potential of cross-disciplinary collaboration. So in teaching, like bringing a graphic designer alongside a musician and a data scientist and imagining what might come out of that relationship. And then at the other end of my week, I'm doing this MSc in geographic data science. And I'm kind of getting it from both sides and trying to feed that back into what Applied Works is doing. And I think it's difficult to do that because we have an established stability, was the word you used earlier. We have, really good long-term client relationships, and we're good at what we do, I think, I hope. But trying to bring those innovation sort of elements into the workflow is quite difficult. But for me personally, I get that inspiration from all around. Like I've learned a huge amount in the data science world that I didn't know about in the last sort of 18 months, machine learning, things like that, spatial data analytics, all that kind of stuff. And I don't really know what to do with that yet.
Yeah.
But it's exciting. And I think the crossover of different disciplines is the key thing for me. That's where some really exciting stuff happens. My students are mucking around with software like Touch Designer. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but bringing in real-time data and all sorts of inputs and doing interesting stuff with it. I think that could be a really interesting thing to bring into our workflow at Applied Works.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But again, you mentioned there something which I think is right, which is you've got all this stuff sort of floating around and you haven't quite worked out where it will land, but it will one day.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we all aspire to do, which is to kind of plug ourselves with inspiration that's ready on tap when we need to apply it. Again, Rasagy, you've got a foot in academia, and we can perhaps extend this conversation now to also teaching. I mean, I guess as Joe mentioned it, in preparing materials, and I'm thinking also Lisa, working on a book, you are confronted with the need to keep on top of latest thinking, latest developments, and latest research. So to what extent do you feel, again, sort of plugged into the new developments, the new ideas, the new proposals emerging from research in Data Viz?
I'll be honest, I'm very poor at keeping up with all the research. I get overwhelmed every time I see the IEEE Viz schedule and just the number of tracks and the number of things that happen every year. And I'm yet to attend one in person, right? So I'm just being very blunt about that bit.
I agree.
I do feel when I teach, a lot of my motivation has been to make sure that we teach what is not easily learned in the industry. And
Great
so
point.
often, things around, just choice of charts or how to effectively make dashboards, etc. I feel there is enough content out there for you to learn some of those things. And I actively just point people to content that exists outside. And that gives me space to teach something slightly different. Like a more recent work that I've been doing has been around either quantified tangible visualizations or doing creative coding like Joe was mentioning, and then using p5.js to represent weird things like just patterns and names. And the reason why I'm trying to do that at the point of academia is because, one, in a school, you're not always bound by the real world need to make things useful. And I sometimes find playfulness opening up to your understanding of a concept, which sometimes just having to make yet another dashboard or a report doesn't let you engage in the same thing. The second bit that I feel is interesting is also that some of the students end up pursuing paths that are not as traditional, and academia needs to give them space to be inspired or see if there's a spark to try some of those areas out. And I think that's also an area where I try to focus a bit more on. So a lot of the research that I'm trying to do is not so much learning about the more academic research side, but I'm mostly looking at newer ideas that people are exploring and then trying to bring back into my teaching practice. So sometimes it is about new media technologies, sometimes it's just new data viz styles that we are seeing, like a lot of tangible viz came up. There was photo viz, like Felton's book, that became really valuable. So how do we get that as a exercise in teaching? And I think that is more around opening up students' idea of what data viz is, from just making simple charts to something more.
Yeah, that's a brilliant summary, and I completely agree as well that distinction between learning and teaching, I think, is important. As you said, people can learn things off their own explorations, but it's those little sparks of I don't know, experience and wisdom that you've collected over the years that you can impart. And also, it's going back a little bit to what we talked about earlier with what we are creating. And there's a question from Kimo in the box there about do we see kind of 3D visualizations emerging? And I would probably rephrase that to re-emerging. And I think there has been a lot of 3D stuff in recent times, maybe more kind of isometric stuff, maybe less 3D in a decorative sense, but 3D because there's 3 dimensions of data. And in some respects, that does go against the grain of a practice, and the purist perspective. But I think to Rasagy's point, it's also giving people the space to know the rules to then break the rules. And I know there's many people talk about that same mantra. And I think that kind of room for creativity is again reflective of what we see these days, which is, I don't think Data Viz is no longer just charts. It's charts and it's photographs and it's imagery and it's illustrations and it's sound and it's video. And, it's no longer just contained in this simple box as distinct from infographics, as distinct from interactive work. I think it's all part of the same pot now. And that is, thankfully, people like yourself giving that room for people to develop. Evelina, again, you've got many roles, one of which is educating and training, like several of us on the call. To what extent are you maybe following similar approach to what Rasagy mentioned there? Are you researching loads and loads of papers and books to then feed into the materials, or perhaps are you leaning more on wisdom as you can become more experienced? It's more the value to impart that stuff.
I wish I could say I was reading more and more research. Like every year, I'm like, I need to read more research, and it kind of almost never happens. And I actually love what Rasagy said. I literally took a note of teach what is not easily learned in the industry. So I have like a quote of you in my notebook now. So I love that. So I do, as you can see, read a lot of books. So I think listening to all of you made me realize that my relationship to research is probably mostly secondhand, if that makes sense. So I would like read a book, or someone who's read the whole thing, somehow they find the time, and then I would like read a mention to it, and maybe sometimes go and read the entire thing on my own. But as Andy and Lisa mentioned, I'm also usually kind of a bit biased. So at the moment, I would read things that have more to do with like rhetoric and angles and editorial thinking, because I think that's actually the hardest skill to find.
I agree.
But it's really hard to find the time, because as you all know, we're a small studio, so it always goes 100 miles an hour. So we try at least to keep up with the latest with Datawrapper's newsletters and yours, Andy, just to and some others, to just see what's happening, and then research just kind of comes after that. But I'm curious if it would be helpful for those who don't necessarily have the time, or are kind of, I think some people are also a bit wary of research, as in it's going to be academic and boring, not something I can consume easily. I hope you won't mind me saying that your book, the Data Visualization Handbook, I think it's amazing, and I would kind of put it in the category of like a bit academic, but in a very good way. Like there's like so much information, but it's one of my favorite Data Viz books
It is one
ever.
of my favorite books as well. It is,
and
a
it's
necessary
also
read.
Yes, and it's also like beautifully designed, so that definitely helps for all of us. Just like you open it, and you're like, wow, this is so nice. So I wonder if that's a good entry point when we kind of want something that is really based on current research. When I teach, I often say, I'm going to tell you something. It's based on the current state of research that we know of. Maybe in 5 years, I'm going to tell you something else. But today, today it's that. Today you start your bar chart at the vertical axis at 0. Maybe later we'll change our minds. But yes, maybe the sort of the secondhand research consumption is a way to enter it. And then, as Lisa mentioned, I think the person that I read the most from the academia is Enrico Bertini, and I'm not really sure I kind of read anyone else, unfortunately. So if you have names, I'm taking notes. So do let
You're
me know.
absolutely right, Evelina, and I think and maybe this is a combative statement or question for the sake of getting a reaction, but there's probably something there about. I mean, Lisa mentioned multiple views, which for a while was this excellent resource, which was translating the research into everyday language. And could therefore there be an argument that database researchers need to be better at practicing what it is that we're part of, which is communicating things, making things accessible and understandable? Again, it's arguable whether it is their job or if it's a shared responsibility. It probably is. It is. It's not probably, it is. But yeah, there is something that we've all reflected there, which is some sense of overwhelmingness, which is both the volume and perhaps just the style that gives a little bit of a blockage. Now, I'm aware of the time. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to cover maybe a couple of topics in one. Now, there have been several posts and questions asked about tools and technology, and I perhaps don't want to spend time in this session too much about tool. And this is not a cheap plug, it is. But episode 6 of this season of my podcast, I did a similar panel with Sarah Slobin from Reuters, Michael Brenner, John Schwabish, to talk about tools and tech. For those of you who've raised questions about the current tools that are out there, what they give you, there's about an hour and 5 minutes of conversation there. Feel free to ask me questions if they don't answer your questions about those things. But I think I want to sort of spend the last 10 minutes or so just wrapping up about the broader resources that we have, and it kind of picks up on the same themes we've just discussed there. And it's absolutely fine to talk about tools, and maybe we should at this point talk about looking a little bit further ahead to the future and the near future. We've mentioned already AI on a couple of occasions. So let me open the question here to, are we content with the resources that we have access to learn our trade, to practice our trade, to pass on our trade to others? And I mean by this things like websites and events. We've talked already about perhaps there are too few these days conference events. We've talked about social media as a platform, which is just finding its feet again. As individuals, do we feel that we've got access to what we need to develop our craft? And then the tools. Do you feel that you've got the tools that you need to do the thing that you want to do? So let me just randomly go to Rasagy to kick this off.
All right. Tools, I think, is probably the easiest for me to talk about, which is, I know there are a bunch of tools. There are some really nice tools. My favorite recent tool has been Felt, which really changed the way map visualization works. Just because I used to work at Mapbox earlier, and a lot of things that we used to talk about, we just, at least I just saw felt do really well. I still feel really terrible that the most common tool for doing UI UX design is terrible at doing data visualization, right? So earlier it was like we had Photoshop, etc. Then Sketch came along, and now there's Figma, but they all just treat data as a, I don't know, like a second-class citizen, if I should use that as a term, right? There's only going to be like 1 or 2 person who's made a plugin which you can rely on to do data viz. Otherwise, you are making, as Brett Victor calls, dead fish, and hoping a developer looks at the dead fish and makes fish alive, which always ends up, being a loss in translation. I definitely think in terms of a broader community, we need more conferences. We need more sort of spaces for people to come and talk about maybe specific things. And one of my dreams, and I think a bunch of people in India have been talking about this, has been to do a Data Viz conference in India. I'm not going to talk about it publicly yet, but hopefully next year we have something. And I'm really excited about that as well. So I sense some of those communities would be great. I also felt that a lot of these sort of making communities like Makeover Monday, etc., sort of faded away over the last year or two. I'm not sure if that was just post-pandemic sort of shift or any other things, but I really wish we had more such places where people who are just trying out have a friendly set of people without any competition to work on something together or make things together and then share. I think those are also communities that I'm really hoping for. But shout out to Data Viz Society. That's definitely a community that I think is really emerged as a very rare community. I don't see that in the UX design world. Like I don't see a parallel to what DVS does, and I've loved how inclusive it has been. So I'm hoping we continue to have more such things.
Yeah, absolutely, and look forward to any news about an Indian conference. That sounds excellent news. And I'm sure amongst the audience, there's probably some reactions there. Evelina, again, the same question to yourself in terms of the resources that you have access to apply your trades, the tools. What's your sort of summary thought on that matter?
I would say that we have enough tools, but still quite a lot of constraints for everyone to benefit from them. So you can, be specialized in coding, so D3 when you need it. Some people only do that, and they're amazing in that crazy world of JavaScript. But for the rest of us, kind of mere mortals, I think there's still a big focus, which is what I see, especially when I teach in the corporate environment, on BI tools. So Tableau, Power BI, that kind of thing. And I always tell people that, especially if you have to do like data storytelling and communicate, then you need tools like Flourish or Datawrapper that have all of those like best practices in terms of data visualization already integrated. And I don't want to do Lisa's promotion, but with Datawrapper, you can literally make an amazing chart in a minute. If your data is ready, you just have 3 buttons to click and you're ready to go. But what I encounter often is that depending on the organization you work for, so organization or private company, security-wise and sort of acceptance-wise, it's really tricky to implement. So people say, oh, we have Tableau, but then when they have to present the chart or put it on social media, they take a screenshot and put it in their slides or online. And so I think we need to work, and I realize as I say it that I don't know how, but I would say that first of all, we need to find a way to make the tools that are already there more mainstream. I don't think we need to add anything. We definitely have a spectrum of, for super custom chart scrolling, you have your JavaScript, then for BI you have this, and for explanatory you have the tools. But how do we make sure that everyone can use them and that companies accept them as a secure tool is another question.
That's a great point. And there's a question from Gautam in the question box, which is a little bit of a different matter. But it's almost navigating the tool option space that's out there and knowing the capability of those and when and why that you'd use each one. And as we know, that there's very rarely one tool that fits all. There's often need to wrangle data in one thing and then do charts another, maybe finesse a published ready version another. But it's more about people, again, being overwhelmed. There's catalogs on my website that lists 309, I think it is, tools, which is crazy. But they've all got a role to play. So navigating, understand their capabilities is something perhaps we could do better to organize those. Lisa, so you've had a nice setup there from Evelina. I'm sure you'll agree that the tool space is well served by Datawrapper, which again, not to blow Datawrapper's trumpet, but it is built upon best practices. It is built upon things that take away the burden of having to worry about the mechanics, but then unlocks the capability of you being a communicator, a storyteller, whatever label we want to put on it. But again, what do you feel is the current state of resources for the community to do this job, from tools right the way through to knowledge?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the nice words. I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort to get to think about all these details, about the best defaults, etc. And we'll really sweat the details there. But resources in general, well, I do miss a few conferences. It's a pity that it's not many anymore. And I mean, we have the Data Viz Society, which, I mean, we have a magazine now which comes out about data visualization. We didn't have that like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's amazing. And we have this new conference, Outlier. I do wish there were more initiatives from different organizations, different people, like we had 6-7 years ago. Now it's fairly centralized by the Data Viz Society, and I mean, they're super open. You can participate, you can organize the conference yourself if you want to, but it's all bundled by them now. The award too, the survey, it's everything is there. I miss X. I miss that everybody was on the same platform, which is not the case anymore. I mean, even with Blue Sky, I feel like a few people will still stay on LinkedIn because they build a home there, and then you have Blue Sky, which I agree with Andy, feels very nice, feels very sentimental. But I'm not trusting it yet to replace X completely. What I see and what I think is very nice is the new, or not the new, but like the 30-day chart challenges. And
very good point.
Which I wouldn't call them resources, but initiatives that really bring more and more people together, even like tool agnostic, which is important. I mean, we've had Makeover Monday before, but it was more like on the Tableau side. To like 30-day chart and map challenges are really build whatever you want. And this is where we also see what Andy mentioned before, like the more hand-drawn approaches, which I so much enjoy. It's really nice to see that coming out of there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Before I come to you, so next, the webinar timer is counting down with 20 seconds left. I hope it doesn't close. If it does close, goodbye to everyone. Hopefully it won't. We'll be finishing in 3 or 4 minutes, folks, so please do just hold on for now. So Juuso, again, from your perspective, what's your feeling about the resources, the tools, the things that we've got access to? I mean, again, I think we all agree about the lack of Malofia, which is a disappointing. Okay, 0 seconds, we're still good. Now, I should say, in Finland, in May, Visualizing Knowledge event?
Yes, early June.
Early June, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come to that this year. I've never been. I've always wanted to go. So that is one conference that still is going. But again, just broadly, what's your sort of take on the resources that we've got access to?
Yeah, I guess the lacking resource is time. I mean, there are great things happening if you just have the time to find them and spend time with them. But specifically about tools, I mean, really great comments from Rasagy, Evelina, and Lisa that got me thinking about this. I think as a practitioner, I feel I have tools for every single thing. But how do these tools connect to each other? That is maybe more of a problem. So in classic graphic design, you have the Adobe tools that because they come from the same company tend to talk together, at least to some extent. In Data Viz, you don't have the same hegemonic like company that makes all the tools, and the tools don't necessarily talk to each other the way that I would want. And in terms of clients' needs for tools, it would be brilliant if there was a standalone version of Datawrapper that you could install on your computer and use without internet connection, because that seems to be a huge problem for some of our clients, that the data is so sensitive that they don't want to put it online in a cloud, even with a trusted company like Datawrapper. And one more thing that came to mind is that I really like a software called BioRender that's used in life sciences to create infographics. it's very sort of tool specific, and I've seen like students with no design background make really good graphical abstracts and things like that using that. So seeing like these very domain specific tools that make it easier to create these more qualitative things, more infographic like things, that's something that there definitely will be space for more of those.
Great points. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. We have the tools. It's just the kind of joining together and the efficiency and the elegance of those joins, and the way that might lead to lack of reproducibility of that process each time you might to update things. Yeah, great point. Thank you. So, Joe, final word on this. I mean, again, very broad topic, but what's your finger in the wind? What's your sort of feeling about? Have you got access to the things that you need to keep pushing in Data Viz, keep abreast of latest thinking?
Well, I've got to be honest, I'm very lucky to have a development team who can build things bespoke for me. But as I'm moving into doing my own independent research, I'm increasingly looking at Python. I'm in the middle of a Python module at the moment, and it's extraordinary what you can do with some of the packages like Seaborn. I'm also really excited to plug that into Datawrapper as well and start using that. So I'm now sort of more having to look for those tools myself, and I find I'm becoming more detached from the kind of Adobe Figma kind of workflow as I have a team of people doing that stuff. The other thing I wanted to mention just about events and things is the amount of inspiration I get from going to exhibitions like 180 Strand is right next to our studio in Somerset House, United Visual Artists and people like that doing interesting things, not really core data viz kind of discipline, but really inspiring, kind of bringing data sets in. Artists like Refik Anadol, working with AI and 3D visualizations. Big Bang Data at Somerset House, I think that was about 8 years ago now. And the Art of Data at Bletchley Park, which I think you were involved with, Andy. I think I've kind of naturally turned my back on social media a little bit, not just professionally, but I tend to be much more excited by seeing things out in the wild. And I just wonder whether there's a way of making more of those sort of resources, bringing those resources from sort of tangential types of exhibitions into the arena.
It's a really good point, and Sonia's immediately agreed with that in the chat box there. I think you're right. I think this, I mean, I'm just thinking the word of the year, the Oxford Dictionary word of the year was brain rot. And there is a sense that if we just rely upon social media as the place that we get our latest stuff, that we're all just sort of narrowing ourselves down a little bit. And I put myself in that camp. And you're right, when you go to these things that are tangential, even if the spark that you get from those isn't something you're going to bring into the workplace on the Monday, something's landed there that it might just manifest in 2 years, 10 years, wherever you might think it could do. But yeah, we looking outside, I never go to conferences, for example, outside the Data Viz world. I don't even tread into the data analytics conferences because that's just too out there. So there's lots of reasons to start to kind of open the borders a little bit on that front. But yeah, I'm just kind of closing a few points of this. I think there are fewer blogs than there were all those years ago. The Data Viz Society has been a terrific development in forging a community and a platform for discourse, and also resetting voices. You know, everyone's got the same level of voice, the same volume, whereas social media tends to lean towards those who've got a greater number of following. So it's a nice reset to give everyone the same sort of platform. And yeah, hopefully there are more events, more conferences, more meetup kind of local events taking place. And yeah, tons of tools, always evolving, always developing. And as I said, we just don't have quite enough time to go into the depths of those in this session, but there's an episode for you to refer to. So we've got one last thing to finish off with. So Obinna, emerge from the shadows, sir, with your final Menti set of questions.
And from the shadows, I return. Hello, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed a wonderful conversation today. I hope you've gotten some wonderful gems to take back. And I've enjoyed being part of this community right here on the internet. So here we have the Menti again. The QR code is up there for you to scan. Once again, you can join using the link to and putting in that code. Please do a thumbs up when you've joined so we know that you're there. There we go. The rainbow of affirmation that we all need in our lives. Oh gosh. On a Wednesday as well. This is hump day. We're getting through it, but I think this is a great way to start the day, you guys. Or some of you are ending the day, so great way to end the day too. Okay, awesome. I think enough people, few people have joined now, so I'm just gonna go ahead and move forward. So, first question on the second half. Did you actually study data viz? Yes, no, partially, maybe. Yeah, we had that conversation about, the good thing about the data viz community is that you don't actually need to study. To some extent, it's a learned practice. But what about the people? Okay, we have some yeses, most no's, some partialies too. I'm curious what that partially means. Maybe put in the chat if you said partially. What do you mean by partially? That'd be amazing to see.
I think I'd put myself in that, by the way. I think, sort of a bit of self-directed learning probably would fall under that, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, next up. What are the tools of the trade? Are you dashboards, Tableau, BI? Are you DataWrapper? Huge plug there. Flourish, raw graphs, those sort of tools. Use mainly design tools like Illustrator, or Illustrator's new rival. His name I forgot, but they're there too. Are you just a pure coder? So the SVELTs, the JavaScripts, the Pythoners, and then are you a paper-based superhero? Cool, okay.
It's all digital. These people are all digital.
No, I'm using paper.
Okay, there we go. Lisa, you're doing a good job. DataWrapper is up there. There you go. But Illustrator and design tools are taking the win alongside coding, and that's interesting. All right. Next up, how do you get your data viz fix? Where do you hear about your data viz news? What blogs do you follow? What communities do you go to online where you are? Are you still on Twitter or X, I should say? Sorry, Elon. Or are you a LinkedIn pioneer? Or you're blue sky, you're looking up in the blue sky. Okay, we've got some LinkedIners. I'm a LinkedIn person too, myself. DataWrapper Dispatch, great shout out there. Blue sky seems to be the biggest thing in the community right now. Data Viz Society popping up in different ways too. I think, Andy, next discussion needs to be with the Data Viz Society. That needs to happen and explain.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Evelina's blog.
Yeah, storytelling with data as well. Okay, so this
so
is
it's
great.
Still very kind of platforms. It's social media. It's communities.
I love how someone said all over the internet as well, and I respect that. You're just Googling. Elevate. Okay, Elevate, a wonderful community online, led by Ali Tobin and team. But hopefully for people in the community, if you haven't heard of some of these resources, hopefully that gives you an idea of where to go to.
Am I allowed to do a plug here, Obinna?
Go for it, Joe.
Go ahead.
We have a newsletter called Rows and Columns that we really focus on a single piece of data viz every month. Love to get some subscribers.
I'm a proud subscriber, Joe.
Thank you, Andy.
Perhaps in the show notes, we can also add that in, Andy, as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so moving on from this question now.
So these last two are these are kind of the sort of summary sense, after the discussion that we've had today. I'll let Obinna finish, but yeah, these are kind of the closing sentiments that you feel amongst the audience.
Absolutely. Just reflecting on the conversation, how do you feel about the state of data viz? Honestly, it could be better. I like the honesty there. I appreciate you and respect you very much. Okay, we have some contents. A lot of amazing time. It's good. Our state is strong. Okay. Some presidential
I'm going to ask if people put honestly it could be better, which is absolutely legitimate. What? Maybe drop that into the chat box. Joe, you've been summoned to the chat box.
On it.
I'm glad no one said this is the absolute worst. So if that's the case for you, I respect it. But I'm glad no one's there.
We feel hopeful.
Awesome. Okay. Last question now then. How do you see the state of data viz changing? This is an open-ended question for us to just see different comments and responses there. How do you see the state of data viz changing? Yeah.
And so it's things like, what What do you think has changed? What needs to change? And changes, again, it's about getting better, getting worse. So anything that you want to blast on there is a closing part of this session. And as you type in, let me just sort of bring things to a little bit of a close in the background. So we've covered a lot of ground. We had loads more ground to cover, but we have time limits, as we've reflected in that conversation. But I'm ever so thankful, first of all, to the attendees for signing up and watching and sitting through 1 hour 57 of this content. Thankful for the viewers and listeners of the actual eventual podcast and episodes online and on audio. But ever so thankful for Juuso, Lisa, Evelina, Joe, Rasagy, Obinna for contributing so much to this session. It's been a real joy to have the chance to spend 1 hour and 57 with you talking about this field. How do we see the state of data viz changing? We can see the things popping up there, new media formats, more diversity, more design thinking in the process. Absolutely agree. The impact of AI will be huge. I've put a couple of links in the show notes and the chat box about articles I've written about this. I know Evelina's written a post recently about your connection to AI, Evelina, kind of what it means to you and stuff. So there are more people talking about this. It's a topic that won't stop now. But we don't have time to go through all these comments in terms of read them back, but we will collect them and share them in the show notes. Some brilliant points there. We could do a whole podcast about these 15 responses alone. Thank you all so much. So we'll bid farewell. Join us again, or join me again, probably, for another episode of Explore Explain. But thank you to everyone on the panel. Let's all do a little wave, and I suppose Merry Christmas is reasonable to say at this point. But yeah, thank you very much. Take care, and I'm going to close the session down right now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
To see more information about today's episode, including some links to key sites and resources mentioned, please visit my website at visualizingdata.com. Here you'll also be able to find details about my book, information about my public and private training courses, as well as over a decade of blog posts. If you've enjoyed this series, please consider liking, subscribing, and spreading the word. See you next time.